I want to get started in about 1 minute.
Yeah, so our
maybe less.
Guys, I started in 2000. And I think which is so we're going to go to this.
Okay, the big clock on the wall says 11, and if I look at the schedule, it says I'm supposed to start talking at 11. So I'm talking. It's 11. Thank you all for coming out. Is this your first Azure Data Fest? There's only been a few. Yeah, so maybe that'd be the first. So my goal is to finish early. The lunch is next, and I'm just going to try and walk through this material, make it as much as I can. A few slides, mostly demo, and we're going to talk about lifting and shifting SSIS to Azure Data Factory, SSIS integration runtime. Who's working with SSIS now? Okay, quite a few. All right. Who's got it in the cloud? Anybody? I didn't see any hands. Okay, wow. All right, you're in the right session. A couple of questions I'm going to try to answer today is, do I need to lift and shift SSIS? And if the answer to that is yes, how will I do that? There's a couple of slides here about me, but I have a stack of business cards in my pocket, one of my pockets, that I will leave up here. And if you want to know more about me, just come get a business card and go to Bingle, type me in, and there they are. And you can learn more about me. The two key things on this slide are I am a grandfather. That'll come up a little bit later. And I'm an engineer, which you will have to tolerate throughout this talk. That is a warning. This other slide is some other stuff I do. By the way, Data Driven, Frank, raise your hand. Frank's my co-host on Data Driven. We're actually running this live. I think I'm on our page right now live. Hi, everybody. All right. So I told you I was a grandpa, right? And that wasn't a warning, but Grandpa Andy wants to tell you a story. You ready? It's a story of Andy Weather. So Andy Weather is a bunch of things. It's a little weather station, an AccuRite weather station that lives on my deck in Farmville, Virginia, about 3.5 hours south of here. It's connected by base station via USB to a severely underpowered workstation. Got 2 gigs of RAM. It's running Windows 732. That's intentional because I warned you I was an engineer, right? You learn how things break when you underpower them. That, via a little application that I wrote in C#, a dumb little app, I drop a CSV file that generates up to Azure Blob Storage. I do that every 12 or 15 minutes. And once it gets into blob storage, I run an Azure Data Factory pipeline to pull it from blob storage and load it into an instance of Azure SQL DB. And there's a picture of my Azure SQL DB table that I then read from, and I use that to populate a couple of things. One is andyweather.com. You can go there right now and see the latest reading that it populated. If my son Stevie Ray got out of bed at the crack of 10 and went upstairs and restarted the app, because it's always crashing, you'll see one from today. If not, you'll see one from yesterday. And also with Twitter, there's another dumb little app that lives on that workstation, another C# console app that tweets at Andy Weather, twitter.com/Andy Weather. And again, you'll see something blank maybe, or maybe you'll see some good information. The reason that this is an exciting weather day for me because we're having a weather event. There's a remnants of a hurricane coming through, so we should see drops in barometric pressure. I'm not a professional weather person. I'm an amateur weather weenie. So all of that said, that's the kind of the story behind this. The piece that I'm going to be talking about today is really this chunk in here that is Azure Data Factory. And I'm going to replace this. I'm going to show you an SSIS package that I built to replace this. Remember, it reads from the blob storage. It writes to the Azure SQL DB table. Okay? That's where we're focusing, because I built this initially on premises. And I want to talk about three things as we kind of walk through this. I want to look at how we view the SSIS configuration, the data integration, data engineering configuration. How do we look at that? What are we looking at? How do we validate that? If we're going to do something like practice lifecycle management, and you may not realize this, those of you who work with SSIS, I'm sure do. SSIS is software development. It suffers from having the name of a really popular SQL Server in the name, which is a popular relational database engine. But it's software, it's not database. So we're going to validate all of the pieces that we have to move. And that's part of software development, lifecycle management. It's part of software development best practices. And then we're going to manage it just like we would manage any other application. And those are most of the slides until the end. I hope it's okay if I jump right into a demo. All right. So here we go. I've got a virtual machine on this system. It's called vDemo. I was feeling really creative when I named it. There is a screenshot of Andy Weather. I haven't tried refreshing this to see if it's going to do better than yesterday. It takes a minute to come up because it's running kind of slow. It's an old GoDaddy thing that it's running on, and it looks like it did pop up really, really quickly, but it doesn't have a recent. Either it's updating right now or it doesn't have a recent reading. But you can go to andyweather.com and see when it's working, and there we go, 718. It's loading, actually. That's what's going on. So it truncates off the table and then loads it. So as we refresh it, just as luck would have it, we'll see these date changes, and there's our latest reading that we stored at 10:48 a.m. You note the pressure in Farmville, Virginia is down to 988 millibars. That's low for us. That means there's a low pressure system coming through, which is the remnants of Hurricane Michael. So I don't know how much more relevant I can make my demo than that. So let's go look at SSIS just for a minute here. And I've got Visual Studio 2017 running. I've got an execute SQL task that truncates my destination table. This is a whack and load pattern. If you're familiar with SSIS design patterns, truncate the destination first, and then my data flow task is an incremental loader only because some of my data coming from the edge, which my weather station is sitting on the edge, sometimes that application duplicates data. So I have to check for dupes. I do that in a lookup over here, and then I'm loading my destination. Very generic names. But note I am pulling the data from Azure Blob Storage, and if I run this, it should run. Let's see. I just pressed F5. Let's see if the data flow runs and loads. And the truncate should load. That takes a couple of seconds, and then the data flow starts, and it begins pumping records in. And we've got a relatively quick connection here at Microsoft. And yeah, we loaded 20,057 rows. Earlier, before Stevie Ray went up and restarted the application that had crashed on a severely underpowered workstation, it was loading 19,995 records. So we've collected some data since the last crash. Is this interesting? Cool. I'm curious. Yeah, it's like I said, Grandpa Andy's kind of telling you a story. But I didn't want to do an entire data warehouse here and show you this. I can, I promise. I've done it in the past. But I wanted to show you just kind of the concepts here. So what I'm not going to show you is I'm not going to go into how to build your own instance of the Azure Data Factory SSIS integration runtime. I'm not, because Microsoft has thoroughly documented this. And I've also blogged about it. So my blog is andyleonard.blog. If you go there and search for lift and shift SSIS, there's two parts, part 0 and part 1. I warned you I was an engineer, right? 0 is a number. So part 0 talks about how to configure the Azure Data Factory SSIS runtime. Walk through that and you can do it. It's still relevant. I wrote it just back in June, and they keep changing things, but they haven't changed that yet. And so you can do that. Once you've done that, let's pop into my dashboard here. If I go to my resources, and there's one called ADF3 Andy. That means there were 3 prior to that, right? ADF 0, 1, and 2 Andy, because 0 is a number. When I go there, I can click on Author and Monitor. It'll open up another window, and it's the Azure Data Factory window, and it will show me this banner at the top. And one of the options in the banner is Configure SSIS Integration Runtime. Now, I'm not going to go through everything about ADF, but I want you to realize there's an integration runtime in ADF initially, regardless. When you create an instance of Azure Data Factory, there is an integration runtime. This is just part of the architecture. They added an integration runtime that supports SSIS. Now, when you're running SSIS in your enterprise, who's using the catalog to do that right now? You SSIS people. One person. And that's not uncommon. Who's running from the file system? Anybody? Yeah, a bunch of people. Yeah, most people are running from the file system still. Here's the thing. If you lift and shift your SSIS into Azure Data Factory's SSIS Integration Runtime, you no longer have that option. It has to go to the catalog. That's the way it is on today, October the 11th, 2018. So you have to know how to do this, and you're going to be I was going to say you're going to be at a disadvantage. That's not true, but you're going to have to learn some new stuff because the catalog is not the same as running it from the file system. You have different options. They have some really, really clever and cool solutions for logging and externalization, configuration, that sort of stuff. It's also complex, very flexible, but very complex. And if you're like me, when I made the transition into putting SSIS into the catalog, I struggled with the externalization and configuration stuff. One example is you could do a bunch of configurations like DTS config files, XML, right? You could list those out in what we call package deployment mode, which is the old way of doing it. Since we have a new way, we had to give them the old way a name. They call that package deployment model. The new way is project deployment model. That's the default. And you could list out project configurations, and you can have multiple configurations, and they would mostly run in the order they were listed there. Don't get me started on why I said mostly. But mostly they would run in that order. But in the catalog, you have a similar mechanism, but you can only choose one thing. So everything has to be in one, what they call an environment in the SSIS catalog. We're going to take a look at these. Because I've got this configured locally first. I wanted to show you what this looks like when I deploy this SSIS package locally. I'm going to stop the execution here. And you've seen the Integration Services Deployment Wizard. You've probably seen SSMS. And when you look at this locally, it looks like this. So there's my Azure Loader is the name of my solution, the name of my project as well. There's Load Andy Weather, that's the name of the package. And then there's this environment. So when I configure this locally, if I go to right-click and configure the project, I can see all of the configuration stuff that's available. There's no parameters in this particular solution, but there are 3 connection managers, 1 for the blob storage and 2 for the target. There's an ADO.NET and a OLADB connection. I decided, so I could demo this, to show you what it's like to configure the ADO.NET using what's called a literal. It's an override. So there are 3 sources of values for parameters in the SSIS catalog. There's the value you built it with, right? You ever heard, as a developer, you ever heard a developer say it works on my machine? This is why it works on your machine, because you built it, right? SSIS is no different. This is one reason, by the way, if you're doing SSIS and you're attempting to practice a life cycle, you have to have at least 3 tiers. The dev environment where you build it, that could be your laptop. You have to have some other place that you deploy it to test it first before you go to production. Or you could just go straight to production if you want to, but I have a saying about this. It's on a t-shirt. It says all software is tested, some intentionally. Yeah, so if you want your customers to test it, you can just go straight to production. But I would rather you be intentional about it. And the reason is, everything's going to work on your machine because you built it. You've got it configured that way. If you need to externalize something and you forgot, and this happens to me, even today, the way to find that out is when you move it to this other machine, if it won't run there because it can't connect or it runs with bad data, that's a good way to check that. Then you go to production. And connection strings are a gimme, right? This is something that we're always changing, but there's 3 sources of values I mentioned. One is that one you built it with that works on your machine version. And that's going to show up here in SSIS. So we're going to see that in the use default value from the package. Every time you deploy this, whatever the values you had in there at development time are going to go with that project into the SSIS catalog. You can choose to edit the value. This is the literal, and you can see that highlighted there. That's exactly what I'm doing here. The third option is at the bottom, use an environment variable, and we're going to go there after this. But these literals are pretty handy. And when I have a literal, you'll note it decorates the text. It makes it bold. The text that's undecorated is using the design time defaults. If I go look at my OLADB here, I've got text decorated with an underline. That indicates that I'm using an SSIS catalog environment reference. Big mouthful. And I call this even worse. I call this a reference mapping. I won't go through the whole spiel. In a nutshell, we create a relationship between an environment, which is a collection of variables with values and data types and properties. We create a relationship between that collection of values and a project inside of the catalog. That is a reference. When we do a reference mapping, which you're seeing here, this is the name of a variable, DBAW, OLADB connection string. That's the name of a variable, and we're saying inside of the environment, the collection of variables, there's one named this. Go get the value from that and come through the reference all the way over to the project and put it into this parameter. Overwrite that value with this parameter. Okay, so it's like 5, and really there's a twist to it that can give you 6 pieces, 6 steps that it's going through to get this. Is this complicated? Yes. Is it hard to get your head around? Yes. It took me a long time to do it. But once I understood it, it made a lot of sense. So using these is a good way to externalize stuff. So I noticed when Mark was talking earlier, there's not many people in here doing government, right? Who's doing government type work? Okay, a few. So you know this. I worked for Unisys for a long time. One of my friends, Tony's here. Tony and I worked together at Unisys. And we did Medicaid systems. So Unisys was a public company, and we were doing work for state agencies that were spending federal money. I was the ETL architect. We had about 40 ETL developers at one time. There were auditors lined up, okay, outside my office that talked to regulators and auditors and stuff. We had to come up with ways to satisfy their really good questions. One of the things they would not tolerate is I run the code in dev and I run it in test and it's all good. And then I start letting others run it through the other tiers in the life cycle. What they would not condone is once I got to the pre-production tier and they signed off on it, is me saying, okay, I'm going to change the connection strings now and then deploy that to production. They're like, no, you're not touching the code. We signed off on it. It's auditable. In some cases, it's against the law, right? Depending on the type of regulatory agency that's involved. So, no, we couldn't change the code, but they were fine with us changing things in the configuration files, which, if you coded it, in some ways, that could be even more dangerous than changing the code. Anyway, don't tell anybody an auditor? Okay, you're not working for any of my customers. Okay. Anyway, so that was their thing, and I get it. I totally did. But so we pulled this out, and they were fine. As we migrated it through, we totally changed the connection strings and passwords and everything we needed to, and they were all good with that. As long as the package didn't change. Excuse me. And I kind of get that. I kind of get where they're going. But those are our 3 sources of values. You can see what it looks like when we override using an environment variable or a reference. Pardon me. And that's what it looks like. We pick an environment variable from the list here. The reference itself has been created prior to this. We cancel here and go to the references list. I've only got one reference configured here, but that has to be done in the configure project. And this is good and configured. And this is running in my local catalog here. You see I'm on vdemo, an instance called demo. And if I right-click this package and click execute, it's going to say, we know you want to execute, but you said we're going to use an environment. This is saying, pick a reference. If there's more than one in here, and I can have more than one in here, I can choose the one I want to run with. I can click OK. It always prompts, the catalog does, it says, do you want to look at the overview report for a local run? I don't. The reason I don't is because I've got this open here. This is the all executions report, and I wasn't quick enough. I was running my mouth. But we can see it ran at 11:19. It just finished. It ran and succeeded. I've got a little test query over here that I can do a record count on. In fact, we can see that I wasn't lying, 19,995. If I run that again, there's our 20,457. These are the numbers we saw a little while ago when we ran it, right? So it's actually loaded those into, and this is a local database, AW local, Andy Weather local. It's just, I'm testing here locally. So now it's time to promote this to the cloud. Now, there's a couple gotchas here. So one is, remember I talked about the environment. Here's that environment. I showed you the reference to this environment. Here it is. And here's the variables that we were looking at in the drop-down that are available to me to use. And there's the values, and you note there's a sensitive setting and a data type and description and all of that. Rarely do I have just a couple environment variables when I configure an SSIS project. And those of you who do SSIS and use config files, I bet you'd say the same. Most of the time, they're somewhere between, I don't know, maybe there are some with a couple in it, but I've had dozens externalized values in here. Have you done that? Okay. So it's important to me to come up with a way to manage this, right? And if I'm copying files, that's awesome. Just right-click, copy, right-click, paste, open the file, edit it in Notepad or Notepad++ or something. I'm all willing to do it. But here I need to promote this code and then edit it again. And here's where I hit the first stumbling block. When I click the script button here, I'll kind of bring this down a little bit so you can see what happens behind it. When I click the script button, it doesn't do such a good job of scripting that. It opens an empty, when it's not empty, there's a carriage return line feed in it. And I can't promote this. Now, if I remember prior to clicking OK when I create this environment, if I remember to click script, it'll script everything out for me. So all is not lost. Also, you can search online, and I like the website SQLServerCentral.com, great site for SQL Server related stuff. There's some clever scripts out there, T-SQL, that'll go find these, and you add a few parameters, and it'll find the values you needed, and it's T-SQL that writes T-SQL. Really clever stuff out there. I like that. Another place where this starts to bother me, and this configured part, right? Remember when I selected these values, like for here, when I did these, this is where I did the reference mapping. Up here is where I did the literals, and it's the same deal, except pay attention, watch right here where the mouse is. When I click the script button. Did you see that? It's just a hint of a progress bar. I don't even get a carriage return line feed like this. No. And again, I promise I'm not trying to pick on, I have friends on the team, the SSIS team at Microsoft, friends who built this even, and they're smart people. I'm not exactly sure what happened because they're professionals and they won't tell me, but this is not complete. That's what's going on here. It's not complete. It works. Again, same deal. If you configure this and then click script, make any change to it, it'll script it right out for you. And the catalog is awesome. It does some really neat stuff. But there's that. Not only is there that, but let me open that configure window up again. I closed it a little too soon. In order for me to see what the value of this connection string is, being overridden here, and configure that out, I have to open up a couple of extra windows. So there's my connection string value there. And then if I go look at my page, so there, okay, that's the name of the variable, and that's the name, okay, there. You see all of it? I got two windows open in addition to the stuff here, and I'm kind of going like, I understand why it's this way, but it just seems like a lot of extra work, and it's not very intuitive, at least not to me. And I'm not very bright, so maybe that's it. But what I did, just for giggles, is I built this tool that I call Catalog Browser. It's free, and I'll have links to it. But the code for the presentation is already up there on the site. Tim and Brian and everyone's set up. But what's nice about this is everything's just in a tree. So here's the project we were looking at in the package. Here's that one we were looking at. And this is, I love this feature. I call this values everywhere. This took me an inordinate amount of time to write because it just did. But there is the reference, the one reference. If there were multiple references, I said you could do multiple, they'd all be listed here. And then if I expand that, there's the value right there. I love that. Does that make sense? Values everywhere. It's just there. Is it okay that it's free? Okay. We've got DILM, which stands for Data Integration Lifecycle Management. DILMsuite.com. You can go there and get it. You got to fill out something. I haven't figured out how to make WooCommerce just say, you know, give me your name or something and then get it. I'm not very good at that part of it. I'm okay at writing GUIs like this. But you can see, and it does things like protect your, you know, your password. It doesn't write down the value of the password and stuff like that. There's a list of package connection references. This is another view of values anywhere, or values everywhere. This is more of a, what does it look like from the perspective of the reference? So it starts with the environment variable, which is the OLEDB connection string. It shows the mapping to the project OLEDB.connection. Sorry, the connection manager. That's what the name of that is, dbaw.oledb. And so it gives you a couple of different perspectives on it. It's read-only. It'll show you everything, but it's free, right? Did I mention it was free? Okay. There's a link down here at the bottom that says, if you want more, there's another tool. And I'll show you the other tool before we wrap up. But how do I get this into, into the cloud? There's a couple ways to do this, and you may not be aware of some of these. So this is my project. One thing that I can do is I can right-click on this project, and I can export it. And if I do this, it'll pick a spot and make an ISPAC file. ISPAC files are kind of a bundle of collection of documents, project parameters, the packages, and then a couple of other documents that kind of serve as manifests. But when you double-click on an ISPAC file, it opens the Integration Services Deployment Wizard. We're going to do this in just a minute. You'll see it. It'll go up there. But there's some other functionality that you can do in here, and this deploy packages is one way to do it. This also opens the Integration Services Deployment Wizard, and I'm a fan of this software. This is awesome software. What it will allow me to do, one thing is when I get to select source here, it says where do you want to go? Where do you want to go from? And I can pick a bunch of different deployment models. I can pick project deployment, and if I do that, this, of course, you have to be in project deployment mode to use the catalog. I could do package deployment mode, and it still works like it's working for you in the file system. But look at this option. Nobody ever does this option, maybe. Integration Services Catalog. Anybody ever done this? And hold it way up if you have. Okay. So you can do this from one server to the next. The reason I got excited when I saw this is this reminds me of my old days as a software developer back before .NET. The years began with a 1. We used to carve our own chips out of wood. It was a long time ago. But what we would do is we would promote code from dev to test to QA to production. But we would do it from dev to test, and then from test to QA. Did anybody ever do that? Am I the only one that did that? Yeah, that's how you got it to production, because you were debugging, and if you were doing it right, I think, you were always source controlling it, right? You debug it and stick it into source control, because SSIS is software development, and there are two kinds of software developers, those who use source control and those who will. You will lose code, it'll break your heart, and you'll go, I should have used source control. And it's free at visualstudio.com for a team of up to 5. I think it's still free. I use it. This gave me kind of the mechanism, at least it let me know it's possible when I'm in the catalog to run from dev to test, test to QA, QA to prod, right? Once I got it configured. But here's the catch. Remember those two things I showed you that I can't script out? The environments and the reference mappings? It doesn't pick those. This is just the packages in the project. And it's great. I mean, this is needed. It's necessary. We need to move that. But I don't have a story. I don't have a complete, what Microsoft is now calling, as part of Azure DevOps, CI/CD, continuous integration, continuous deployment. I think that's what CI/CD stands for. I get the D wrong all the time. Maybe I'm wrong about that. But that's what they're trying to do, and they've talked about it. In fact, if you go to adf.azure.com, that site we just went to where you could click and configure, there's some videos at the bottom. My friend Laura Rebelke's doing some. Gaurav, and I can't remember Gaurav's last name, he's on there talking about how they do the CI/CD story. They are working on making it so you can just walk this right through, and now your data integration can play in source control and version control, just like JavaScript and C#. Bless you. It can do all of those things. And that's awesome, because SSIS is software. But Andy, you keep saying that. Yeah, software is all. It's not a database. So we need to treat it like that. So this is good. I'm not going to finish the wizard here. I'll go ahead and cancel this. But you see, you can do that, and you can do it right from a node. What I am going to do is I'm going to open up I'm going to actually open up SSI's catalog compare, and I've got my local version here. And that's going to show you, this is, here's our project, and if this GUI looks very familiar to what we just saw, that's because it is. It's the exact same code underneath. Part of the reason I discovered, let me say it this way. When I started writing both the viewer and especially the catalog compare, and I wanted to be able to script out those objects that it won't script out in SSMS, I couldn't get those pieces to work. I'll just say that. And I was talking to a friend of mine who's much more talented C# developer than me, and I said, I don't know what's up. He couldn't get them to work either. He said, I don't think it's you. I'm like, well, what do I do? And he says, you've got to build your own option. Now, at the time, I thought I was about 2 weeks away from releasing the very first beta of Catalog Compare. This was 3 years ago. And no, I was, in fact, 6 months away because I had to build this option. I did, though. I built the option. And I was able to do all the script. And in fact, I scripted out everything for this. And I put it in, not development, I put it in my E drive and in my test folder here. And this is the local version of it. And what it does is it makes folders and stuff that makes sense. But it creates SQL files for everything in that folder. So if there's a dozen SSIS projects in there, you're going to have a dozen ISPack files. And they're numbered, and that number is intentional. These are dependency driven. So the one creates the folder. Everything in here is re-executable. There's a mathematical term called idempotent, which means if you run it over and over again, you get the same results. It doesn't drop and recreate the folder. It checks to see if it exists. If it doesn't, it creates it. When it does something like that, it tells you down at the bottom in the messages in SSMS what it did. You can copy that, put it into a ticket, a notes field in a ticket, and then close the ticket. Tony was here a little while ago. I don't know if he's still in here or not, but when Tony and I worked together at Unisys, I used to do this regularly, and it actually saved my job one time. Story for another day. Maybe catch me at lunch, I'll tell you how. I didn't lose my job because I copied and pasted messages out of SSMS. But everything in here is just laid out. And if I want, I can do even this. I can say, for this folder here, generate all of my scripts. Note I can deploy too, by the way, back and forth. I can generate the scripts for this one. I'm going to leave this in my Azure Loader local. You just saw that folder, I think. Yep, there it is. So the only thing in there right now is the demo instance. When I click OK here, it's going to give me an SD Andy demo instance. And it created the folder for the catalog folder. And then there's those same set of scripts, except the values are all different because these are from the cloud. So the connection strings are different. It's not running local anymore. But all of those are out there. And if I wanted to, I could just open these up and do it. And remember, too, I could just right-click at any given time and say, deploy the folder and everything in it. If there's a dozen projects in there, it's going to deploy all of those. 100 packages, they're all going. If there's 12 environments, they're all going. If they participate in references, that's all going. The literals, the reference mappings. It takes time to do that right now because connecting to the cloud and loading that much data, the way that I do it right now, it needs optimization, but it works. And it's a way to get your code from where it is to where it needs to be. And if you do all of that, however you do all of that, however you get this data to the cloud, once you've done all that, all of that lifting and shifting, you can then connect to the database. And one thing about this connection, let me just show you. There's a couple of ways to connect. One is you can connect to just the database engine, the relational database engine in Azure SQL DB. But if you want to connect to the catalog, you have to use a SQL login to do this, and you have to pick SSIS DB here, like I do there. If you don't do that, I'll show you. You'll get a connection that looks different than this. I mean, it's not broken or wrong, but it doesn't have, if I just do default and click connect, it'll connect to that. But notice my nodes here are databases and security, and I've got a bunch of databases listed here. Up here, I connected to SSIS DB, and I've got databases and integration services catalog. So when you do that in SSMS, it knows, oh, you're connected, so you can reach the catalog. And you can do all of the same stuff. If I right-click and click configure, there's everything up there. I've got the same reference mappings here. I've got different connection strings. I'm connected to a server named SVAW. And if I run this, just like I was running, I can execute from here. The execution dialog looks a little different. In the cloud, I've got this tree view here, but I'm going to pick my environment. I'm going to click OK. And it asks me, do I want to see the report? I don't, because I've got a version of the report open here. There's SV Andy Demo, and if I click OK, I should see package execution or pending execution. It takes a little longer to get things spun up out there, but it works, and it'll run. In the meantime, I wanted to share with you, while we're waiting for that to run, that I mentioned I built these tools, and they are available at DILM Suite. There's the DILM Suite, Data Integration Lifecycle Management Suite. You may have saw a book cover flash by when I was showing my About Andy slide. That was my latest book. It came out at the end of last year, and it's called Data Integration Lifecycle Management with SSIS. And I tell you how you would do it if you didn't want to buy any tools or write your own tools, how you would do it out of the box and where the gotchas are and things like what I showed you with the empty window when you script and stuff. I showed you all of that, and then I show you, here's some tools I wrote that maybe can help. So if you'd like a copy of that book, email me, and I'll send you the PDF. Don't buy it, okay? I mean, I get like a quarter every time they sell the book, so it's not a huge loss. Don't tell my A-Press people, Frank, is this online?
I'll edit this out.
Okay, yeah, never. Jonathan's cool. He loves it. Because a lot of people are like me, they like the physical copy, but I'll send you one. Just, again, pick up a card, email me, and I'll do that. I won't add you to a mailing list or anything, not myself. But, yeah, I talk about that. And there's some free stuff in here. One of them is this solution called Catalog Reports. And I'm looking at the local version of it right now. This is, and this is one of the things you can download from DILMSuite.com. It's free and open source. It's actually, you go to GitHub and pull down the code. It's an SSRS solution that's written in 2014. Easy to upgrade if you want to do that. I know my friend Tony does SSRS, so Tony, do not look at the code too much. But it does what I want it to do. And it looks a little like what we've been looking at on the executions report inside of SSMS. The reason I wrote this is I had a client who really needed access to this data in production but had no business getting SSMS installed. Those reports are hard-coded into SSMS. They're beautiful, but they're stuck. And there's some clients who need access to the data in production. In this case, she was trying to get her team, they were getting ready to do regulatory reports, and it was going to take them 3 days, and she wanted to know how's the load going, because when it finished, they were going to start. If it was running slow, they could go take a long lunch. If it was zooming right along, no, all hands on deck, everybody wait until it's finished, then we'll start. So that's what kind of inspired this. I'm going to tell you, innovated. I used Profiler. I ran Profiler against, while I was refreshing the reports, I grabbed the queries, I chopped them up to what I wanted them to do, and the queries are inside of the reporting solution. Usually when I put this in production, I'll pull those out and put them in stored props. But these are there so that they will travel with the solution. Anyway, that's just one of the things there at the ILM Suite you can get. The other thing is Catalog Compare. And one nice thing about it, I was talking about, view and validate and then manage, is I can do that validation piece. So just comparing the catalogs. And I can see that, in fact, I'll do a real quick one because I've changed stuff. Do a quick compare, and one of the things I can do is I can right-click and say, show me just the differences. And there are differences between this. There should be, right? Because it's running on 2 different tiers. One's my production tier, and one is my test tier. So there are ways in here to mask and stuff, but just being able to look at something like this, And I totally stole the interface for this from Redgate software, SQL Compare. That's exactly how it is. The good news is I talked to them about it first. I was like, I'm totally ripping you off. Because it's a beautiful interface, the way they do it in the trees. And they were like, yeah. So they're cool with it, but it helps. And again, if you just need the viewer, the viewer's free. You can just go. There's nothing that stops you from putting two of these side by side and comparing them manually, right? Looking at these guys. But that's it. I want us to be able to treat SSIS like I treated software. Now, when I say software, don't get too excited. I was doing Visual Basic. But I did Visual Basic for over 40 years. It was hard to, I learned Basic back in 1975. I'm not making that up. I was a wee lad. And it took me a while to get started on C#. I've done it for about 3.5, 4 years now. I built both of these in C#. I feel like I've worked my way up to being a noob, thanks to help from friends like Frank, who was a C# MVP, and other friends, Kevin Hazard and Scott Corey, who are super smart on this stuff. But these tools, I want to be able to do what I was able to do with test-driven development in VB. About the time I was leaving software development and going to data, test-driven development, Kent Beck, you might remember that book, it was a great book. He was talking about how to do this, and what you get when you do test-driven development, what comes out of that is confidence. And I know that sounds silly, but I've had this happen to me with SSIS. I was 40 hours into a 48-hour deployment weekend, okay? And we had to roll back. And the data architect, the reason we had to roll back is there were differences between our QA and our production SSIS categories. And the data architect looks at me and says, how can I know these match? And I was like, I don't know. That's what started me thinking about this in the first place. Is everybody that uses an SSIS catalog going to need these tools? Absolutely not. I promise, you can do this using the tools that are built in the SSMS ships. And if you want to practice life cycle management and migrate from tier to tier to tier, you can go search for those clever scripts out on SQL Server Central. You can do it. You can write your own clever scripts. You can do it. This just helps. That same data architect, a couple of years later, he had about 300 or 400 packages in production. He was trying to stand up a new environment so they could start doing some changes in their data warehouse loads and their data warehouse architecture. And he worked on it for a week. And he actually emailed and said, remember that problem? We solved it manually, breaking up configurations side by side and copying and pasting from environment to environment. I'm not making that up. That's how we fixed it. And the next weekend, we were able to finish our deployment. You're like, remember that? Have you thought about that before? Have you solved it? I don't think I've got something that's maybe beta, probably alpha. I may be being generous calling it an alpha, but it was the very beginnings of this. I sent it to him, and in 45 minutes, he had figured out what was different and had fixed it. It was actually running in the other environment. He'd been working on it for a week, 40 hours. He had 40 hours. He said, you know what? I probably could have done it in 30 minutes if I just started with this. It's a hard problem to solve once you realize you need to do it. Not everybody needs this. If your enterprise is running a handful of SSIS packages, you may not need this. You don't have a lot of configurations. You may not need this for anything like this. But if you're going to the cloud right now, and you're running on the file system right now, you need to learn about the catalog. You need to, because you cannot deploy to the file system in the cloud right now. Now, if you absolutely want to do that, there's nothing stopping you from standing up a VM in the cloud, installing SQL Server on it, or picking one of the images that has it on there, and running from the file system in there. You can totally do it that way. That costs more, but you can do it. And this has a couple of other benefits I hadn't talked about. I'll mention one. I'm almost out of time. Actually, I've got about 15 minutes, but I wanted to end early. One benefit is there is a design pattern in Azure Data Factory. There's an execute SSIS package activity. So you can design a controller or an orchestrator pipeline in Azure Data Factory that runs your SSIS packages in your enterprise in whatever order you specify. You can spin up things in parallel, you can run in series, however you want to do it. You can do that in ADF. And if you want, you can run it that way, but it has to be in an Azure Data Factory SSIS integration runtime, i.e. a catalog in the cloud. So it has to do that. I think this is just a neat idea for running on premises. I like the catalog for that. I think it's a really cool execution framework. Some of the stuff around the edges, and I showed you the stuff, some of the stuff around the edges isn't finished. But I finished some of it. I took my whack at it. Anyway, that's it. That's my spiel. I really want to thank everyone, and my slides are uploaded already. And you can contact me. Again, there's stuff here. Ways to reach me and read about stuff I'm doing. I do a lot of training, and I'm also on Twitter and Facebook. And I've heard somebody say Facebook. Probably the best place to do that is look at Data Driven. Frank and I are on it as well. I didn't put the link up there for Data Driven. I did have it in my intro. Sorry, Frank. DataDriven.tv is the things missing from that list. These slides are up. You can get them. I wrote the Stairway to Integration Services for SQL Server Central, totally free. Well, they paid me. It's free to you, which was really nice. They actually paid me really well for that. The DILM Suite website, which I've shown you kind of a screenshot of, my company's website, entdna.com. It's always an honor to present. I want to thank the organizers of Data Fest for inviting me and for the huge honor of allowing me to talk to all of you this morning. Thank you. I'd be happy to take anyone's questions.
So, in terms of the security project, for example, the question is like, without opening the port 1433 on on-prem servers,
Right.
and they wanted to, because the security guy said, no, I don't want to open on port 1433, but I wanted to put the data with the package ADF V2. So, I know there are some workarounds, but what is the best solution?
So for security configurations, I always hand that off to people who are much better at security than me. One of the reasons I speak at SSIS, well, not SSIS security, I'm good at that. SQL Server Security is I'm friends with a guy named Brian Kelly. And he writes for SQL Server Central, and he's an MVP in infrastructure and security stuff. And every time I hit a snag, I just call my friend and say, hey, how do I do this? So as a result of that, I've learned very little about SQL Server security. But I hear what you're saying. And when we talk about architectures here, adding the cloud to the mix doesn't double our options. It really squares them, right? And if you're trying to get data from on-premises to off-premises, when people hire me to do this now, and they do, the trick becomes synchronizing it, right? You want to load all of the data from yesterday to 1899. I get the insurance data. There's actually 1800s data in there. We want to do that. Then we want to load, maybe that took a day. Then we want to load everything we missed yesterday. And then we get to the tricky part. What are we missing while we're loading? And when we do that, I do that on premises still. That's my preferred method to do it. Because think about it, my target is still a connection string. Right? SSIS doesn't care. It's an ADO or an OADB or sometimes ODBC. It's a connection string. And since SSIS is architected to be provider agnostic, I just give it the connection string in the file.
But integration runtime requires the code to be open. That is under the catch, right?
I believe you.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. That's a good question, though. It is, yeah. But yeah, the security considerations, especially when you're talking about sensitive, regulated data, and it's getting just more important. That genie's not going back in the bottle. I mean.
Other question
Okay.
Related to SSIS, there is something called cache point, or
Cache connection manager?
No, there is a point where it's some data transferring is happening.
Checkpoints.
Checkpoint.
Right.
So the checkpoint. So let's assume that there are 100 million of data is transferring, and suddenly at 50 million the data got lost or something. And how it's really integrated with the ADF V2, and how it's going to talk to ADF V2 saying that it lost or the connection at 50
Right. Really good questions. So first, Microsoft kind of now recommends that you not use checkpoints. A couple of reasons for that. There's some caveats. One is it's very task-based. So the way that checkpoints work is when a task completes and succeeds, it writes it down in the checkpoint file. So that if the package restarts and it finds a checkpoint file, then it'll go there and say, what's succeeded? What happens if it's in a loop? That's a problem. What happens if it's parallel? You have parallel paths, also a problem. So they don't say, they didn't kill it from the product, but they say be very, very careful when you use this. It doesn't store things like variable values if you're looking through. It doesn't store things that may actually make it worth more. So the way I solved that problem, because I used it for the longest time, the way I solved it is I re-architected my packages, and I did it in a way that follows software development best practices. The very top of the list of SDLC is separation of concerns. And right under that, the next bullet is decoupling. So I write small unit of work SSIS packages instead of what I call a monolith. If you've built monoliths, don't feel bad. I promise I'm not picking on you. It's not your fault. Nobody told you to do it differently. But if you build the minimum number of data flows per SSIS package, optimally 1, then you've got separation of concerns. It promotes code reuse, 2. But it creates another problem. Now you've got, a bajillion packages. Before you had 1. It had 24 data flows in it. Now you've got 24 packages. What are you going to do? So that's another, a different product. It's out there on DILM Suite. There's a free open source version of it. I call it an execution framework. And that will allow you to drive that with metadata. Just run this package, that package, that package. Very simple, not complete answer, but that's how I address checkpoints. If the package fails, I can restart it at that package.
Yeah, only especially the data asset. They don't want it to restart the whole package to run from
Right.
They wanted to use the other content on 50,000 storage. They want to load 51,000 on it.
Well, see, that's a design pattern. That's an incremental one. And you just make the package so if you run it every week, it loads a week's worth of data. If you run it every 5 minutes, it loads 5 minutes worth of data. Different solution. But interesting questions. Let's catch up. We'll catch up afterwards because you've got some interesting stuff going on. Any other questions before we wrap up? All right, I'm around till 2, 3, something like that, depending on the weather, literally. But I'll be here, and I won't be here tomorrow. So if you've got anything that you do want to raise your hand and share, catch me in the hall, come tap me on the shoulder, I'll stop. Cool? All right, thanks again. Enjoy lunch and the rest of Data Fest.